Recording is started.
Dun, dun, dun. Here we go.
Welcome, everyone, to the July 2026 FMDiSC meeting. Just a little bit of housekeeping here. Please mute yourselves while you're not actively asking a question. And we have a good meeting for you today. We've got, first up, Jeremy Brown, who is going to talk about working with web viewer objects and getting data in and out and using large data sets efficiently. I think that covers a lot, but not all of what he's going to talk to us about. And okay, got to get my notes up here. And Chris Moyer is with us, or will be with us, and he will be doing his usual wonderful Tech News Roundup. And then we'll talk to Todd Geist of the recently renamed Proof about the future of AI and FileMaker. And so I'm really looking forward to all of those presentations. So, Jeremy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right.
And off you go.
Great. Let me grab. Let's see here. All right. Hi, everyone. Today I get to present, as they said, Lynn said, just my journey in working with JavaScript and FileMaker, specifically in getting data into the web viewer. I have found in the past 8 or so years of working with the web viewer that there's a lot of getting data in can be tricky and tough, and it's worth exploring, I think, the successes, the failures of it, and the having to refactor code, and then also think of the questions that should guide our development of a web viewer widget, a JS and FM widget. A little bit about me, quick. I'm left-handed. I enjoy Disney. I work there sometimes. I actually love hospitality. I'm studying that because Disney pays for my education. I get to go here part-time at UCF to study some hospitality. My dream is actually to have a bed and breakfast while doing some coding here and there. That's kind of where I'm headed, I think, in my old age here. I had a dog of 10 years, Kirby. He passed away a few months ago, and we have a new foster dog. About 2 weeks after he passed away, I insisted we get a foster dog who was about to be euthanized. A dog who was about to be euthanized, and she became our foster, and she's been with us for 4 months, and we're trying to decide if we should adopt her. We probably will. Play too many video games for the time I actually have. So yeah, that's me. I also have the JS and FM community. If you're interested in learning more about JavaScript and FileMaker, it's a good place, or it will be when I get to it. So today's session, like I said, we're going to talk about the journey that I've taken. I'm going to show you some actual client files, not with real data, that show the problems that I have encountered in getting data into the web viewer. I want to bring up some questions I think that could apply to any example or any instance of people working with a web viewer to build out a widget. And no matter how you build it, eventually informing your intelligence, how we should do this, how should we go about this. At least one of your intelligences know a lot about this already. So if you use said intelligence, you can speak its language and know. And so that's what we're going to come away with today. All right, so let's talk about this. And I'm gonna show a lot of examples, and we'll get right into the messiest one that I've done in the past couple of years. The first question that I think about when I'm working with a web viewer and I'm trying to build out a widget is, what's the data that we're talking about? Generally, how big is it? What is its size? What is its complexity? The slowest part of working with a widget in FileMaker is getting the data into it. So we have to be aware of that, and that's what drives a lot of this. So we have to think about the size of the data generally, and we have to think about how we're going to handle that in FileMaker. I'm going to show you an example here of something that I built that was really working for a long time, and then it just went kaput. So the data is the most important thing to the size of it is really important to think about. Let me bring up the, let's see if I can do this. Okay. So I built I work with Angel City Data as a contractor, and for them, I built a pretty complex system that works with shipments of products. This goes out and and what I built for them is a wizard. I built a quote wizard for them, and with Angel City Data, working with their team to make this work. This is the extent of it. It's very complex. It has a lot of value lists that come from FileMaker, actual value lists, or in some cases tables. And there's just a lot here. These are all value lists that come from the file. I think these are as well, and they're rendered in a nice little way. That was a problem that one of the problems that I was thinking of is this widget is pretty complex. It has commodities in it that when we add a commodity, it has to know which commodities are inside of the app that we're building. And so I knew that when I was building this, I had to load a lot of widgets. And I knew that a lot of pieces of data, a lot of data from a lot of different tables. And so I had to think about how am I going to load this? And I had to be very deliberate about it. So this is one where it worked really well while we were testing. So we were testing on a file at our local server, and there was about 1,500 customers in the system. So I was just like, okay, well, I'm going to just load all of those in here. I know how to fetch them using the execute data API script step, and I can just load 1,500 in here. That's a lot of data, but I was testing it and it seemed okay. Well, very quickly after I felt like this was good, we found out that there's not 1,500 customers, there's 9,500 customers. So colleagues loaded all that data into the customer table, and suddenly we had to deal with, 9 times more data, 8 times more data than we originally had planned. So this came to a screeching halt because I was trying to load the data at the first time because of just because I wanted to get all of the data into the web viewer so it can be used. This web viewer, again, has all these different value lists that are choices that are tied back to tables and primary keys. So I had to get all that in there, and one of them was the customers. And we needed, of course, to show the customer name, but store the ID. So when we put 9,500 customers in here, this just went kaput. It took 2 minutes to load. It was really bad because I was trying to load all 9,500 customers in at once. So that is something that I had to think about. And because I didn't know the extent of the data when I first started working on it, I built it one way. But as soon as I learned about, 9,500, we had to find a different solution. So the data knowing the data is very important with what you're going to do. In this case, the solution that I solved was I realized, and I think this is one of the points here, I realized that if I show this screen where they're searching for a customer, they know exactly what customer they're trying to create a quote for. So they're not going to go digging through a huge list of them. They don't need to scroll through 9,500 records. They only need one company that they're interested in for this screen. So rather than loading all of the data in there, I took a different approach and I said, I'm going to load just some of the data. Actually, I'm going to do a real-time search. So rather than loading 9,000 companies in, I'm instead doing a search that lets me find based on characters using a FileMaker script to go fetch that real data and bring it into the web viewer. I don't need there's not 9,500 companies loaded. There's just one. And now I have all the complex data, the related data that goes with it. So this was an example where the data was okay for a bit, and then it just was awful because of at least the performance of this was bad because I was choosing a data method that just didn't really work. So we have to know the complexity of the data. We have to know how complex it is. 9,500 records is not that bad, really, for a web viewer and even for FileMaker. But what the problem was, we had a bunch of related data that we had to bring in here to show address, contact, and phone and stuff. So these were all in related tables. Those were all in portals. And it suddenly got really messy when I was loading all of that data in. Again, if I had just loaded 9,500 company names in here, that probably wouldn't have been a big deal with their ID. But because the data was pretty complex, I really had to rethink my strategy. And we'll look at this. Hopefully look at the solution. We will look at the solution. So that's the biggest factor, is to think about that. And so while we're thinking about creating a widget, while we've been assigned to it, we can inform our intelligence to look at the actual data, get a sense or know exactly from your client how much data this eventually is going to be having to work with. We all are great at building a development file that contains sample records, and it may have 10 records in a table. But when we're dealing with a widget and trying to get the data in, we have to think about how much data is actually going to be used. So again, way to inform our intelligence is to look at the data, to know the count, to realize how complex the data is. All right, so that's one of the questions that we can work with. Another question, which relates back to the wizard, is, are we loading all of the data or some of it? I think that this is vital for your intelligence to know what you are planning on doing with this data. It would have been nice to load all 9,500 in there, because every character that I type searches back to FileMaker, but I couldn't do that. And I just realized, again, they're only needing one customer. So I'm trying to balance 2 minutes of loading all 9,500 records with a couple seconds of a type ahead that runs a FileMaker script every time I type a character. So in this case, they don't need to see all of the data. They don't need to see all of the data here. They only need to see one company. Eventually, they may need to see other companies, and so those are fetched the same way. But again, in this quote, we're potentially only searching for 4 companies out of 9,500. So that's an important consideration to think about. Do we need to load all of the data, or can we get away with loading some of it? I can't think of a time. Well, okay, I can kind of think of some times when we might need to see all the data, but I think that those cases mean that there's just not a lot of data. Tables can be built to have a pagination system. Tables can be built to have a filtering mechanism. So we don't actually ever need to load all of the data into the web viewer unless there were very specific circumstances. We can use the mechanisms of the web viewer, of JavaScript, of the browser to actually go and fetch what we need when we need it at whatever time. So I think that's a big consideration, is knowing how much of the data we're putting in there. And so when we inform our intelligence, when we think about that, we have to describe what the user needs to have in their view when they're looking at the web viewer. Again, they probably don't need all of it. In this wizard, they didn't need all of it. In a dashboard, I have another, let's see if I can find it, another example of a dashboard. This dashboard here was built for someone else, and it is fetching data kind of incrementally. So it's a dashboard that I built that allows them to see a summary and different sections. Each of these sections has a different data source. So in order to make this run fast, I'm not loading any of the data except for this first part. And I can show you how that's done. But if they decide they want to look at the other sections, then I go and fetch the data. So in this case, I decided I don't need to load all the data for all of the sections. If they're gonna skip over the financial performance, I shouldn't have had the data in here in the first place. But when it first loads, this summary information gets put out. And then if they click onto another tab, another button here, and go to a different tab, then we are running a script called fetch data that passes in a parameter and a type and then runs through some logic to go fetch the data for that specific tab of the web viewer. So if we can make those considerations and we can say, all right, I can break this data into many pieces and I can load it only when they need it, then that is a good thing. It gives us a better performance for the web viewer. What's nice about the way that I've built this, and again, we'll get into the technical part in the JavaScript side, is that each tab here, each tab lets me go fetch the data for data that doesn't already exist in the web viewer. So this revenue demographics data doesn't already exist. There's no data for real. It's just a sample file, but it's still running that script. But the financial performance data already exists inside of the web viewer. It's stored in there somewhere. So is the client overview, and so is the summary. Now the summary is stale data. It's old. So the web viewer has decided I need to go fetch some more data. And that's what's going to happen for each one of these. If after like 5 minutes or something, this one needs a fresh, the web viewer will take care of that and it will push it into, or it'll go fetch the data and it will bring in new data. So that's a big consideration, is to handle this data gathering incrementally, just some of it. Maybe they don't need to see all of it at once. And as you inform your intelligence, you decide on that specific thing and you describe that in your in your intelligence, and you say, hey, we don't need all the data. If they click on this button, we need to go fetch this data. If they click on this button, we need to go fetch this data. But otherwise, let's just leave the data out of it. So that's very good. And we have that possibility. We so much have that possibility with the tools and the techniques that are out there. Some intelligences know all about this, some don't yet, but there's plenty of opportunity to learn that. So here's another question that I struggled with and I had to figure out what to do. What is the user experience? How do we want the user, what do we want them to encounter when they go to a layout with a web viewer on it while it is getting the data? So this is one that I have struggled with and I've kind of been slow about coming around, but as I work on web projects, I realize we need to give the users a good experience when they go to a layout with the web viewer. Many web viewers, when they load their code, just because of how slow they can be in doing all the loading, they start with a blank screen. So if you go to a layout here and it's blank, there's a button up here that says load log. It's going to handle that and it's going to then go fetch the data. But in this case, the user experience is a blank web viewer. That's a blank layout. That looks pretty awful. This is part of getting data in because it's directly tied to the data. There should be something here, and this is what I've slowly come around to doing because of the tools that we have, rather than just relying on a button to load the web viewer. You can see that I am doing something there. You can see that there's a bit of a skeleton. That's a good user experience for a user to see something rendered in the web viewer. But mine is still relying on this script. You can kind of barely see it. But a better example would be this one right here, where it might be just too fast. Yeah, it's a little bit too fast. I'm going to slow it down. But in this case, I'm letting this web viewer boot itself up very simply. I'm not passing anything in at the moment. I'm just letting it boot up, and I am going to fetch the data after I have loaded the web viewer. So you can kind of see something. Let me put a pause in here for 2 seconds. This is a good thing to discuss with your intelligence and to learn about, is when we go to a screen, we want to give the user something so that they know something is coming. So again, with the tools and technology we have, we can do this easily. This was a lot harder before FileMaker 19. This was a lot harder before, not harder, it just took more time before artificial intelligence. But now we have the tools to allow the user to see something at least before the data gets loaded. So in this case, again, what's happening is, I'll just run the debugger. Not that one. We'll skip that one for now. When we go to this example, we go to the layout, it's self-booting. So the web viewer itself is saying, all right, you've loaded me. I now need to go fetch the data. And I'm pausing so that we can see it. And then it finally loads the data into the web viewer. So that's a great technique that we have at our disposal, giving the user good user experience when the data is loaded. We've had many problems. We've had many people like, why is there a blank layout? So my goal as I continue to develop this and refine my intelligence is to give the user a great experience for the web viewer. I don't think we could do this before FileMaker 19. I think it was really tough to do it. We kind of had one shot to put the data in at the beginning when it first loaded. And it took a lot of figuring out to be able to refresh the data. So now we have that ability. All right, so let's see. What other question do we have? So the user experience is important. We can think about the web viewer in two ways. Self-boot, which I showed, we can run it by a FileMaker script. And if that FileMaker script ties into your whole process, it's perfectly fine to use that. But a widget, if our client says, we don't want to see a blank screen there, we need to give them some good way to, good thing to see. So this is a good question. And I think, again, my intelligence would say, what does the user want to see when they are looking at this screen? What should I present to them to let them know something is coming? Should I just present a little loading sign, or should I present a skeleton of the table that's about to appear?
Stop it.
All right, let's keep on going. So that's one of the questions. Let's see, do I have, yeah, so I've shown that. Let's see, the companies. Yeah, so this is, yeah, that's what I want to show. This is a fun one as well that I like to play with now. We have the tools to do this. And I hope to do this at the end is build something from scratch using the intelligence that I've built out to make this happen. How often does the data need to be refreshed? Again, before FileMaker 19, we had limited options to do this. It's so much easier nowadays. We can tell the web viewer, I want you to load some data in, and then I want you to refresh it as often as I tell you to refresh it. So this gives the user an experience of seeing new data come in whenever new data is added. And again, this probably is something we could do. We don't have to do it. It's perfectly fine to load a companies list and let that be static. Maybe we're just looking at it quickly, but if the expectation as we develop this out is that the data is refreshed, then we probably want to do that. And I guess I would have to say I'm leaning towards doing this a lot as well. Even if the client doesn't say I need to see the data refreshed, I am deciding to answer that because I realize that's kind of how the websites in the world work. If I'm sitting here with it on and it's refreshing, in this case, every 10 seconds, then I can go and I can capture, oh no, that's Disney. I can capture the newly created records. Probably missed that 10 second. I hadn't committed the record yet, but hopefully within 10 seconds and 5 seconds now, this will refresh and we'll see Disney company added. So I see that it doesn't have any cell phones, so we'll just do 407-111-2222, and we'll say that's Waltz I don't know, Walt's phone number. Walt, work. All right. So again, we can give our users a good experience by refreshing the data as we need. And again, it's so easy to do with this, with the technology that we have and with the stuff. So again, the wizard, I have had to struggle with that because we're adding data, especially we're adding companies all the time. And one of the ways that I solved that was to simply give my users the chance to type in the company name from the start so that they can get the latest and greatest companies. But this is another way as well. We can refresh our data. And we'll look at the example of this. This one is actually, I'll show you this. This is let's see, this is my companies. So I'm going to open up refresh companies. Where is it? What is the name of this widget? Give me 1 second. I need to see what the name is because I forgot. Name companies refresh. Yeah. Okay. So companies refresh. Let's see, where is it? Company. I have to find it here. I'll show you what this looks like in practical terms. Here it is. Okay. So let's grab it. Bring it over here. Okay. So what's happening in this case is I have asked my widget, I have built my widget to refresh every few seconds, depending on what I say to do. It is the refresh mechanism. There's a default refresh seconds here, but in my code, there is a function that I've written that simply says, I want you to fetch this data. I want you to run through a process inside here to go fetch the companies every certain number of seconds. This little function right here uses a React library called tanstack React query that has a hook or a function that automatically will keep track of the data and go fetch it whenever it needs to. This bit of code right here is amazing because it allows me to, again, just load the web viewer in and let it run to fetch every couple seconds, whatever I want. This is a common library that intelligences know about. There's millions of videos on YouTube about it, tanstack React query, and it's something that I use in all of the work that I do. This is the function, this library function is the thing that gives me the chance to go fetch the data after the web viewer has been loaded. I'm also using a library written by a local FileMaker developer called FMGopher. That is the actual mechanism that fetches data from FileMaker and returns it. I can't use the regular FileMaker.perform script because that is not asynchronous, and I need my function to wait for FileMaker to return the data to me before I render it in the web viewer. So this little function is just going to get the companies every 10 seconds in this case. It's just running a new instance of the fetch data script. So as soon as that 10 seconds pops up, my fetch data script comes in, it brings in some important information, and then we do the thing where we go fetch the data using the execute data API and return it back to the web viewer. So this is really nice, and it gives us a lot of possibilities. So as we increase our intelligence with this, we need to decide how often that FileMaker data has to change. And then we need to apply the techniques that are out there that give us the opportunity to refresh the data. Okay. Again, this question comes up a lot of time. It's one of the very first questions I ask. Does a dashboard need to stay up for hours and hours? And so does the data need to be refreshed, or is it just a one-time thing? But this gives us the best experience. All right. Other in FileMaker, there's a lot of possible ways to fetch the data, and it's a matter of I don't know what the best solution is. I use the execute data API script step to do this, but there are lots of ways to find data that we need for the record, for the web viewer. So it's really just a matter of what are you going to do with it? One thing I tried to do with this collect the data back in that quote wizard was I would let's get rid of this one because this fetch is just going to fetch all the time. So I'm gonna close this out. Go to my sorry, I'm gonna go to my I'll go to my JB test layout. Give me a sec. And one thing I tried to do, which didn't work very well, and I wouldn't recommend it, is I tried to cache the data. So here's the widget that was working with. It's a wizard. And I really I was thinking about caching the data. How could I cache the commodities and then just go fetch those with the FileMaker scripts and pass them into the web viewer? It was my thought that the find mechanism, just do a find or execute data API script step, is the slowest part. But I think what's actually the slowest is taking this data inside of the memory of the client and pushing it into the web viewer via the script. I don't know exactly how to test that. All I know is one of those two mechanisms make it really slow. So I thought, what if I cached it? What if I got rid of finding the commodities and just cached the data into an array, and then once in a while or every 3 times a day or whatever, update this field with new data from the table? That was an interesting idea, and I actually tried it with the shippers. So the shippers were the 9,500 records. That there was a huge array in this table, in this field, and it was just incredibly slow to get this. I was actually caching the data and then bringing the cache into the web viewer. I could do that with services because it's a small amount. I could do that with load types because it's just a few, and shipping units even, but the shippers just didn't work. So caching the data is an okay method, I think, of collecting the data. But as a friend points out, we're effectively doubling the size of the file. We're storing the data in 2 places. We're certainly doubling the size. These commodities, the 50 or 60 or so, are already in the commodities table. Maybe I shouldn't cache it here. Maybe I should just actually use it, fetch it for real. So this was a balancing act to find out what was the best way to do it. And I'm still, other than the companies where we type ahead, I'm not sure if this is the right way. Obviously, this is a problem. It was updated 2 months ago, 3 months ago, or whatever. So I probably need to either make sure these are refreshed, or I need to just fetch this data in real time. But this is one of the methods that I tried. So I don't know. It works. It kind of works. It works for some things. It doesn't work for other things. So maybe it's worth just giving up this idea entirely, not using the cache, instead fetch the data in real time. In this case, this is I'll show you the quote wizard here. The quote wizard is doing a lot. So what I'm asking it to do, here's that same use query hook or function that gives me the chance to load the web viewer. Once the web viewer is loaded with something, then I go and fetch the data that I need. In this case, I'm fetching all of the data, and I am going to fetch all those value lists at the same time, and I'm returning them into one JSON block. Other than the shippers, every value list here, except for the shippers, comes in via one query, and it gets then distributed among the app. But this is how I am fetching the data. So I'm fetching all those, and then this function right here is the one that lets me type in a customer query, the first couple letters of a company name, and go fetch that data using a FileMaker script. So this has been quite the challenge, and I love the opportunity and love the struggle to get this correct. Some days it about beat me, but I think we got through it, and I think we have a good mechanism for them to enter a quote to, oh, there's another value list that came from FileMaker that I had to load. So this gives them a chance to work with that. There's a few bugs that I still have to work out, but it is on its way. In this case, I don't even need to fetch data because it's the same as the customer, so that's good. Oh, I gotta type in so I'm gonna type in another shipper name using a colleague's name, test company. There we go. So now I have all of that information. So again, deciding how the data gets loaded, deciding not to cache it, and so forth. This was quite a struggle. And again, it took a long time to work through it. I have another one that I'm still working on to make sure that it works out. It's a point of sale system. No, it's a production system. Let me see if I can find that. It's a list of deliveries that need to be worked on. So where to go? I don't know where it went. I have too many windows open. What am I looking for? Well, I'll search for it here. Let's see. Oh, nope, that's not it. I have too many files. Okay, so these are the questions that I have wrestled with, that I have come up with, I think are answers, and that I have developed a pattern for. I have talked through my intelligence about doing this. How am I going to load the data? Which data am I going to load? What does the user experience have to be? And how much does the data need to be refreshed? It's worth looking at each of these questions when we develop a widget. And whatever intelligence you use, however you build the widgets, I think that these should be part of the conversation. I haven't looked too much at what is being done in the agentic space inside of different apps that develop widgets. I know that's the big thing, and it's great that that's coming. But I would hope that these conversations get to be a part of what is developed, because your agent may not know the state. It may not know the state. I don't know. Maybe it will know the actual record count in a file, in a table. But these need to be part of the conversation so that we can accurately and effectively build this. These are my 5 questions. And like I said, there's a lot of patterns that I'm using that I have decided, here's how I'm going to always fetch data. I'm always going to write a script called fetch data. This is based off of when Todd and I built the add-ons. We have a script called FCC find for the full calendar one that goes and fetches the data. So my web viewer, my widget knows always to fetch the data using that script. Also, I use a web viewer event script that sends something back to FileMaker. And so those are 2 patterns that I have developed, that I have applied, I have internalized into my intelligence there. These are the code examples of showing how I'm fetching the data. The left over there is just a simple, this is the asynchronous way of having the web viewer go fetch the data and return something back, and have the web viewer wait for the return. So this is using the FM gopher. When I'm sending events back to the web viewer, this is kind of getting data out. I'm just writing that. And over there on the right, using companies or use companies, this pattern is what I'm using each time to allow my web viewer to refresh itself every whatever seconds I ask it to refresh. 10 seconds is probably too often. Probably could go 5 minutes or more. But these are the patterns that I'm using in everything that I do. And I think that these help me to solve a lot of the questions that I've presented. They help me to develop the answers so that whatever task I'm given, I can solve that well. I'm talking a lot about this. I'm showing code that looks complex, and it certainly is. These are the things that I'm using in the various examples. I'm still using a development environment. I have a couple versions ready for use. There's a React version that will build complex widgets. We're using uh, the FM Gopher. That's a library that I can't live without anymore because it helps me to go fetch the data in an asynchronous way. In the middle there, I'm just using various JavaScript libraries. On the right, this is kind of the new stuff for a lot of us in this space is for the complex widgets that I'm choosing to use React to build this. React will allow me to build interfaces that change based off of data. And the data obviously comes from FileMaker. So I'm using tanstack query to go fetch the data, to check to see if the data is stale, to refresh the data if it needs. It's a whole state management library. It helps to manage the state of the data. And then I'm using some Tailwind CSS for this design. This is a lot of stuff that we can know, and I love helping people learn about this and understand about this. But the great thing is, if we don't know it, every agent out there knows it. Anthropic, Claude, ChatGPT, they all know this stuff. So if we talk to our prompts, if we or design our prompts, if we think through these things with our intelligence, whatever intelligence, we will probably land on some of these core techniques, these techniques. Certainly the FM Gopher is vital for a FileMaker developer to build something that goes and fetches data asynchronously, returns it back either once or during the refresh possibilities. So this is what I would recommend that FileMaker developers spend some time on with your intelligence. I keep saying that because it's either your intelligence or it's some agent that is going to help you build this. And if we are able to answer these questions and give these questions to our prompts, we can build something that will really work, that will have a lot of features and be really good for what we're trying to do. So this is what I have gone through in my time with Angel City Data and with other people and building widgets for my own company. This is the stack, the methodology, the questions that I think about when I'm building it. And I think these are worth every one of us to think about how to do this. Again, whether you're having a conversation with yourself or you're having a conversation with some agent, these are the ways to do it. I'm sure I missed some questions. Has anybody else had data, like trying to get data into the web viewer and have had a question or a struggle with how to do that? For a long time, I was worried that. Yeah, go ahead, Lynn. Yeah.
I just have a really naive question here because I haven't done a lot of work with this. Does the default browser set on the user's computer influence the web viewer?
No, it's built into FileMaker, which web viewer or WebKits we're going to use. So
Okay.
we use Safari for Windows and Edge or Safari for Mac and Edge for Windows.
Okay.
Yeah, this is the thing that I go through, and telling our intelligence about these questions, working through it with them is really, I think, the way to go. Whether or not what comes next in FileMaker in the app can handle all this, I really would love to see any new designs that come from web viewers. If they're handling the data properly, as in refreshing it or not refreshing it, as the case may be, loading in or not loading it in, those are legitimate questions that need to be addressed. I was actually worried for a long time.
We have a question in the chat about, are you going to be sharing your slide?
Yeah, so I actually have markdown file that I'm going to share because it's easier to read through. It talks about all those technologies, the points, and then I want to provide some examples that show that you can dive into and clone the code from the GitHub repository, look at the file, and so forth. So I'll work through this and get this developed. So, but this shows all of those patterns that I use that I think, again, an intelligence will need to know about. All right.
Okay, thank you. That's great.
I
Are
was
there
really
any other
worried for a while, like
questions at this point?
I was worried for a while, does this even matter anymore? Should we still take some time to think about this? But I have actually, even in as I use AI to build widgets, I've had to think about each of these questions every time. Because it's at this point, the experience that I've had, my AI doesn't know about that, although that is changing. I think my agents are learning what I do every day.
I have a question, Jeremy.
Yes,
Have you experimented with the FileMaker MCP server to
I
give it
haven't
more
yet. That's
context?
Yeah, I haven't yet. That's certainly next on the block. Yes. So can a lot of these questions be solved out of the box by using an MCP server that looks into FileMaker to our apps?
Well, I think it depends. The current FileMaker MCP server that Claris is putting out um, gives you access to at least like the data. So maybe your
Okay.
AI can know how many records are in a certain table and kind of use that as some context for how to load things or whatever. But hopefully they keep growing the MCP server, and if they can manipulate the schema, create tables, create fields, stuff like that, then you could really see something, amazing happen. I actually built my own MCP server for FileMaker so that it can do that using the OData API as
Uh-huh.
kind of the go-between, so that my custom MCP server, can manipulate the schema the way OData can. And then it was able to say, oh, well, if we, throw these tables in there, you can do X, Y, Z. So it might be interesting to kind of incorporate the MCP connection into your which AI you were using Claude, right?
Yeah, and if we got some time, I'll show how I create widgets. But yes, that is what I'm using. Yeah.
Yeah, so Claude is really good at connecting to MCP to at least, uh, give it a little bit more context. Ian's saying MCP is not always the best approach. If you know exactly what data you want, you may find that OData is more efficient. Yeah, Ian, that's a good point. That's why I decided to build my own MCP server. So you can go. There's some SDKs out there that allow you to build your own, MCP server
Okay.
using an API like OData.
I certainly
You
haven't
have
explored that
about
yet.
10 minutes.
Okay. I haven't explored that yet because as a contractor and as someone who builds widgets for people quickly and then, gets out, I don't always have access to, I don't know if I need to have access. I assume I need to have access to their server and to their files. Sometimes I build widgets with no access to their files, and I
Mhm.
just have to ask them for a sample of their data. And one record is usually plenty. And then I can usually build something out
Mhm.
with that.
Uh,
So I use Auto FMS a lot. I just discovered finally after many years, I'm sure that there's an MCP server tab on there. So I'm interested in exploring that to see what I can do with it. But um, this is one that I need to work on. This production layout is nice layout for my clients, but it takes a long time to load. So this is one that I'm still trying to fix because the data just takes too long. I'm loading deliveries and delivery items. I need a better way to do this. Certainly, me sitting across the country from where the server is, it's slow, but I
mhm.
need to find a better way. So this is something that's still in progress here. Um, so Yeah, so all of these questions that I bring up are, I think, important and I think are worth discussing. When I um, when I build widgets now, I think through all of these questions. Usually, I think through them myself and think through how can I, build out this widget because I know JavaScript, I know how I can build it, I know what I can build, and I have my patterns. But I also am exploring the idea of using Claude to do this for me. So because I am still learning this myself, we've had a lot of good conversations about it, and I thought I would just show something quick. We have about 7 minutes or so left. So I'm going to go to this is my old version. Wow, that's really old. Okay, so I have a bunch of data in here. I'm going to just grab some data. I'm going to grab some companies' data. For the third time today, I'm going to build a companies widget that shows companies in there. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get some data from my system. I have a tab, the data right here. I'll just go and get JSON, get element, data, and I'll do 0, get the first one. No, I don't want to delete the element. What did I get? Okay, so this is the data of one of the records. I'm going to make it an array in a minute. But here's how I would go about building a widget using the questions that I bring up. So I'm going to go over to Claude Code. I don't know if you've all used that. I'm starting to use it more. So I'll go into my directory that I want it to be in, and then I'm going to start Claude up. So I'm working on this this skill, I think they're called in Claude. I'm working on this skill called, are they called skills if you do the slash? Are these them?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So I have one called JSON FM widget that I started to build out, and it walks through all of these questions that I just presented to you, and it helps me build something. So I'm going to run through this. It'll be 7 minutes worth of time. The first question says, what kind of widget are you going to build? And I'm going to say, I'm going to build a complex data fetching widget. And then it's going to go through and ask me all of the questions that I need for this case. So it should show a list. Here is the data. Paste it in. It needs to be an array. That's one record of an array. The file is log test. This widget name is, I don't know, companies again. And it is just a simple list. There we go. So I'll just do that. I'm going to give it some basics that it's asking for. And then it'll build it. And so this is the way that I'm answering the questions. Claude now knows what I think is important when it comes to this. So it's asking me now, should we load all the companies or just a filtered subset? I'm going to tell it just to load some of them. I'm going to make it self-booting. I'm not going to have a config, and we'll do that. So it asks me these questions, and I'm able to now let it build it out. So this is why we should speak to our intelligence about this. My little skill here is set up to help me walk through those questions in a step-by-step manner. Let's do that. And so I can build a widget relatively quickly because my system has the questions built into it. So for now, at least, these are the questions. These are the things that we think about. These are the struggles that I've had over the 8 years. And I'm hoping that I'm continuing to learn. I'm continuing to understand how to work with data better. The OData, the MCP server, those are all great ways for me to continue my journey. But yeah, so that is me working with data, getting data into the web viewer. We have so much more power since FileMaker 19 came out now many years ago, but with it, we have a lot of complexities to solve and a lot of possibilities. So there we go. There's my widget being built by my it's developing all the code that I need to go fetch it. So,
Well, I
all
have a
right.
question. This
Yes.
is very nosy, but how many tokens do you go through during the course of development?
I don't know. I don't pay attention to that at the moment. I'm not spending $100 a day or a month or something like some people that are around, but um then that's yeah, I don't know. Let's see, what is my Claude will have to tell me what I'm at right now, but I don't spend more than $20 a month on this at the moment. So we'll see if I need to increase that. But
Okay,
all
that
right.
seems reasonable.
Yeah. All right, so that is working with data, and I hope maybe there's one day that we won't ever have to think about data again. Maybe it's coming soon. But for now, these are the questions that we think about as we build a widget. That's it. Thank you.
I really appreciate that you brought to us work in progress and things um, that delineate your process and your errors and your successes, because that's what we all need to know about. It's wonderful when people bring pristine, wonderful, perfect files in, but the work process is very important for all of us. So thank you for doing that. Are there any final questions? We have a couple more minutes before we go to Chris.
I second what Lynn said.
Yeah, well, I've got plenty of in progress files, so um, and continuing to learn files. So if you
That's
ever need
just
in progress
wonderful.
stuff, that's me.
All right, how are we going to access your markup file?
I don't know. I've figured it out here. I'll probably put it on my JS and FM site and make it available there. So it's just jsinfm.com is a documentation site that I have for this stuff. So
Okay, I will put that out on the mailing list and
okay,
maybe a note on Meetup so people can access that. All right, thank you.
wonderful.
Okay, Chris, let me see. Oh,
How's it going?
there you are. Good. Here, let me make you co-host so you can share your screen.
Okay.
Hmm.
Everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Yep, looks good.
All right, let's go. All right, welcome to the July edition of the Tech News Roundup. We're going to start off with the ongoing brouhaha that is Anthropic's relationship with the government of the United States. For those of you keeping score at home, the Department of War declared Anthropic persona non grata for anyone who worked with the Department of War. And then when Fable 5 came out, it was out for, I think, a day and a half, maybe. And then the Department of Commerce shut it down, saying if anybody, any foreign government citizen could work with it, then they had to bring it offline. So Anthropic shut the whole thing down. And then on June 30th, they said, okay, now you can do it again. So Anthropic sent a bunch of people out to Washington. They figured out whatever they had to hammer out. After 2 weeks, Fable 5 was put back online. So far, so good. Pivoting to Apple. Apple has had a Apple Silicon roadmap for some time now, and they had plans to release the M6 chip, and then followed by the M6 Pro and Max and Ultra and all that stuff. And they have pretty much trashed the back three-quarters of the M6 line. So there will still be an entry-level M6, and then they're skipping straight ahead to the M7, starting in the first half of 2007, um, purely because Apple wants to surf the wave that is the AI boom. So this was based on reporting by Bloomberg. They say the M6 will have an updated memory architecture, an upgraded neural engine, and Apple still plans to release an M5 Ultra for a refreshed version of the Mac Studio as soon as the end of the year. It'll have approximately 36 CPU cores and 80 GPU cores, and could have as much as 768 gig of unified memory. So that thing would be a beast maxed out. Shifting gears only slightly, China has a supercomputer called Lineshine, and it placed first in the top 500, which is a twice yearly ranking of the world's fastest supercomputers. This ranking was originally conceived as part of a supercomputer meeting in Mannheim, Germany in 1993. And ever since then, every 6 months, they've released the top list of supercomputers, and it's generally been dominated by US supercomputers. But now we're number two, so China has taken the top spot. So good for them. Also, sort of AI adjacent, the labor force participation is at a 50-year low. So economists have spent the last week arguing about why 720,000 people have walked away from the labor force in a single month. This report was released by Indeed Hiring Lab. A woman named Laura Ulrich, she's a former Richmond Fed economist. Um, and her May report, The Great Mismatch, How a Shrinking Workforce, AI, and Labor Reallocation Will Define the Next 15 Years. So they see this as an ongoing thing. The report estimates the labor force will decline by roughly 3.7% or 5.9 million workers between 2025 and 2032 before partially recovering. So interesting dynamics going on in the labor market. FBI news. On July 2nd, the FBI seized hundreds of domain tied to NetNut, which is a residential proxy service run by a publicly traded Israeli company. Google and multiple security firms say that NetNut was linked to Papa, which is a botnet of at least 2 million consumer devices, which have been co-opted. A lot of them were smart TVs. So your smart TV may be part of this botnet if you didn't know that. Nearly half of LG WebOS apps and over a quarter of Samsung Tizen apps, or Tizen, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, analyzed by researchers, contain proxy SDKs that turn viewers' devices into traffic relays without any meaningful consent. Pivoting to the data center, ongoing everything. There's backlashes and protests, and people hate data centers and don't want them in their backyard. Cheyenne Board of Public Utilities announced that the city will no longer be accepting industrial wastewater from its closed-loop data center, Meta's data center. The bacterium was detected after Goat Systems LLC, which was responsible for the construction of their Cheyenne campus, discharged wastewater into the Cheyenne sanitary sewer, and then testing then identified Cupriavidis gilardi, I think is how you pronounce it, had contaminated the plant. And so they had to truck all that water, who knows where. I hope wherever it went, it was sanitized and sterilized. So it didn't get into somebody else's water supply. Mother Jones. This is a wild story, very California-centric. So unbeknownst to most people, logging companies and the U.S. Forest Service have been spraying massive amounts of herbicide in clear-cut areas where forest fires have cleared forests in California. And not just any herbicide, but glyphosate, also known as Roundup. And so this has been going on for a couple of years now. And so tens of thousands of acres are among California's most heavily sprayed forest areas, and they look like that now. Not a thing living except for some trees. So it's still a moonscape now, 5 years after the Dixie Fire. Amazon was sued in Australia. It's been a couple of years since they introduced their ads to their Prime Video streaming service, and then users had to pay to remove them. In Australia, the company's competition regulator took the company to court over the matter. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission accused Amazon Commercial Services Pty, which is the local operator of Prime, of breaching Australian consumer law. So they're going to have to pay. Scientists, quantum time flow backwards. This is very technical. I almost hesitated to stick this in here, but basically scientists have developed a new way to control quantum systems that can make their behavior appear more consistent with time moving backwards than forward. So a quantum system, such as a group of qubits, follows the rules of quantum mechanics rather than classical physics. And using the newly developed control protocols, researchers can suppress the usual emergence of the arrow of time, which is an aspect of this system, and even reverse its apparent direction, making quantum processes look as though they are unfolding backwards in time. Worth a read. This is some heavy reading, but kind of a wild ride. You should check it out. Regarding interpersonal relationships, a study of 544,000 couples across 29 countries confirm that relationships fail more often when women earn more than men. And they were looking for all sorts of, are there cultural aspects to this? Is it threatening men's sense of identity or, what's going on? So it's 29 countries, several different cultures, and the research turned out, or see all the theories they had for this were basically saying, nope, not that, not that, not that. And what they did find was that there was the sort of determining factor. If you had compared couples who had kids versus couples who didn't have kids, the ones with kids had 23% higher probability of separation. And so the pattern points to what researchers call work-family conflict, the structural collision between the demands of paid employment and the demands of family care. When women earn more than their partners, they are by definition not scaling back their careers after having kids at the same rate that women in more traditional earning arrangements do. The domestic labor that children require, which research consistently shows continues to fall disproportionately on women regardless of employment status, then accumulates on top of a full professional workload. And this is the result. Also strongly recommended, worth a read. And then, sort of keeping in the theme here, I'm going in little theme streaks. Patients with female doctors have a lower risk of death or serious complications, a study found. A growing and consistent body of research has reached the same conclusion again and again. This is kind of a meta study, so they have multiple studies showing this pattern. A study published in the Annals of Internal Medicines by researchers at UCLA analyzed nearly 777,000 Medicare patients hospitalized for emergency or urgent care between 2016 and 19. Female patients treated by female doctors had a mortality rate of 8.15% compared with 8.38% when treated by male doctors. And these sound like small differences. So we're talking like 4 and 5%. But at the scale of millions of surgeries performed every year, it translates into tens of thousands of preventable complications, death, additional hospitalization. And so female physicians are more likely to engage in shared decision making, the practice of explaining treatment options and involving patients in choices about their care. Patients who feel heard are more likely to disclose symptoms they might otherwise downplay and are more likely to follow through on treatment recommendations. So interesting finding for those of you who need medical attention at any point in the future. And then here's an odd one about Ozempic. Scientists found a link between Ozempic and violent behavior. Basically, the same mechanism that dampens people's craving for food might also dampen tendencies for violent behavior. So there's a side effect that they didn't expect to see coming. And then,
Chris,
yes.
I've also seen they've observed reductions in gambling and
Oh, yeah, there you go. And so compulsive behavior, that all makes total
other
sense.
compulsive behavior.
Yeah.
I've also heard it helps with allergies too.
Regarding pancreatic cancer, they have tested some experimental compounds, PCAI, very difficult to pronounce. I'm not even going to try and get into it, but they, in a new study, investigators examined a group of these compounds, originally created to interfere with abnormal signaling using the pancreatic cells carrying these mutations. and it basically causes cancer cells to self-destruct. So a promising new therapy on pancreatic cancer. And then this one is a new pathway to turn water and carbon dioxide into climate neutral methane. Natural gas still plays an important role in many industry sectors. But scientists have discovered a way to synthesize natural gas using CO2 that was captured from exhaust gas streams or directly from the air. Some exotic materials were needed. This research was done in Austria, and they found nickel on yttria, stabilized zirconia. And so in contact with water vapor and carbon dioxide, the composition enables a cascade of chemical processes which now result in methane. So kind of an odd thing, but promising for carbon capture. And then last, this happened in Highmore, South Dakota. It was their very first ever wind farm built 20 years ago, and a 131-mile-an-hour windstorm came through and destroyed the entire crop. And so they're all going to have to be replaced. But I've never seen them just broken like toothpicks like that, but just kind of an odd thing. They are going to rebuild the wind farm. So fret not, the wind power will return. And that is the tech news for July.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Chris. So many interesting things here. I've got notes.
I wanted to add regarding the job issue. There's a report that just came out, I think, a couple days ago, that's showing that they did some research on 21,000 U.S. firms who are using AI, and it looks like they went through their build data to see which ones are using AI the most, and the ones that are actually the most AI forward are actually adding jobs. They've added anywhere from 10 to 12% more jobs if the company is kind of pushing for more AI and actually spending more on AI, which is kind of a new perspective on the whole, AI is taking over jobs fear. It looks like in the companies that are actually using AI, they're actually creating more jobs. I'll put
Yeah,
this
healthy
article.
companies are definitely using it as leverage to chase after their backlogs or expand their offerings or go after new markets. So if you're a well-run company, then you're going to keep your institutional knowledge in-house and run with it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've seen that as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Chris. I look forward to next month. So we're going to go to breakout rooms now. And welcome back from the breakout rooms. I hope everybody had fun. We are going to be having some announcements. John Howell has an announcement, but before that, does anyone else have anything they want to announce? Rick, anyone? Okay, John?
Okay, I'm typing into the chat a discount code for full access. So get this. Claris CEO Ryan McCann is going to be joining us at Full Access this year again, which is exciting. It's on August 6th to 10th. He's going to be offering developers a Q&A session, answering miscellaneous questions that are come up. Of course, that's not going to be recorded. It's kind of top secret. You got to be there to do that. He's going to be there for lunch with us. That's exciting. We also have a number of high-end AI developers, platinum partners. Brief overview of it, trying to do this in less than 4 minutes. Some of the AI tracks are from more angles than you can imagine. We might talk about AI. FileMaker coding, agentic coding. Vince Minato is going to talk about the relevance of AI in today's world. Todd Geist has got 2 sessions on AI. We have 2 under the hood sessions that David Simpson's putting together that Clay Mackle will be involved in, because we actually have like 4 or 5 engineers from Claris going to be there and several from Apple. So there'll be 2 under the hood sessions. Darren Terry's going to revive his shaking the dependency tree. Yeah, he did that in 2014, one of the most loved sessions of all times. He's going to update it, and he's going to give it in 2 parts, all on, I think, Thursday afternoon. We have a plugin plus powwow with Christian Schmidt, Clay Mackle, Ron Cates, Jesse Barnum, and others who I might be forgetting, who do plugins. So that's a plugin plus powwow with a lot of the big powerful plugin makers. Christian Schmidt will be there talking about the latest features in MBS software, Monkey Bread software, as well as giving a workshop in it. Ron Cates and Alex Seiler are going to talk about building apps with FileMaker and WordPress. They run our entire website on FileMaker and WordPress, and they have an app that's released on the App Store for Apple that you can get on the full access website right on the homepage. They're going to release it for Google as soon as Google gets out of the way in a week or two. I swear it's the nicest app of any kind I've ever seen. It is very thorough. It manages everything on our website replicated on an app. We have 3 AI college graduates that Eric has put together. Eric Mathers has put together from San Jose State. They're on scholarship to full access. We actually have 5 people coming in on scholarship to the program. So we're trying to support the community and the new people. We're going to have sessions on project management, button bars, add-ons. Chris Ippolite and I are talking about public speaking. In the evening, we have music jam sessions. A lot of musicians are coming. I'm bringing friends who are musicians. So that's going to be fun. All the drinks are free. Friday night, we have a Jeopardy game, and I and my friend George have put together a full-on TV game show set of Wheel of Fortune. So it's Wheel of FileMaker on Saturday night. You will not believe how cool that is going to be. This is the only FileMaker-related conference in the US this year. Really, it's reasonably priced. It's like going to this whole thing for everything, food, lodging. The event is about the same per night as getting a nice hotel in Silicon Valley. It's really inexpensive. I have just dropped a discount code that'll give you $300 off if you get that here at this meeting, and if you sign up before Monday morning, I think, by Sunday night at midnight. We've got about 70 people coming so far. We still got a month to go. People are signing up. If you can't make it to full access this year, we have already contracted for our next year in 2027 in October in Central California. So all you guys in LA and all you guys in Silicon Valley can get to our new facility next year within a 4-hour drive. So it's going to be much more available. It's on the road to Yosemite, a very, very cool place. We will reveal the details at Full Access Live. And if you can't make it this year and you want to go, Eric Matthews put together something called read-only access. So there's going to be some live streams on YouTube, and some of the sessions will be recorded and played later on YouTube, about 2/3 to 3/4 of them. But you will not get the same experience as being there in person, especially with Ryan McCann, and the opportunity to meet your friends and your neighbors. So please come. Please consider coming. This is my experience cool. I've had people tell me this is the best conference they've ever been to last year, and we're tripling down to make it better. That's Chris Ippolite sending me a message right now. A lot of cool people, a lot of fun. You will not be sorry if you can make it. There, 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, John. Okay, so next up, if there are no more announcements, next up is Todd Geist, who is going to talk to us about the future of AI and FileMaker and all sorts of cool stuff. So, Todd, let me find you.
I am ready.
And make
I
you.
hope. We'll see.
Where the hell are you? Oh, there you are. I'm going to make you co-host.
Great.
So you can share your screen. There you go.
Excellent. My favorite feature of Zoom is the ability to share a part of my screen. I just love it. So let me just level set here a bit. I'm gonna be intentionally provocative in this session, which, I mean, maybe for people who've heard me speak over the years, they'll be like, that's not actually that new. I don't mean provocative as in like thought provoking, but more like saying things that might make you mad. Yeah, they're going to provoke a reaction. At least I think they will. And I would say this is like setting the sort of ground floor of the conversation that we hope to have at Full Access about where this is going. And maybe we'll get to do more in depth or get to do more specific details or questions or things like that at full access. I am going to show a bunch of things today using ProofKit, but I want that. It doesn't actually matter that much that it's ProofKit. I want you, hopefully, I'm going to use it as a way to talk about agentic engineering in general and agentic engineering in FileMaker specifically. There are lots of other tools that are out there. And as you've heard from Ryan, there are tools coming from Claris, which I can touch on just a tiny bit, a little bit later, maybe. So FileMaker in the age of agentic AI. So the first thing that I'm going to say, I want to talk about is that there are times in history where there's no step 3. And so, normally when we think about what to do next, when we're planning a business or planning our education or planning our lives, we think we need to do this, and then we do that, and then after that is this. And we can kind of see the path that gets us from point A to point B. But we are at a time in history when I think it's more like step 1, step 2, rhinoceros. And what I mean by that is that there's no logical or linear path that your mind can necessarily take to get you from where you are to where you will be on the other side of this. This is a funny, this 1, 2, 3 rhinoceros comes from a Zen koan book called Bring Me the Rhinoceros, which was written by my Zen teacher, actually, John Tarrant. And it's kind of getting at this point that sometimes, and actually where many of the most interesting times in our lives is when we can't actually see the other side. And we just all of a sudden one day, when we engage with the material enough, we realize we're on the other side and things look very, very different. And I think we are at one of those times in history where, especially in our industry, where that is happening. There was a before AI and there is an after AI, and the two are they're just different. It's different skill sets, different ways of thinking, different ways of approaching the problem, and it can be quite challenging to get through that gate. But once you're through, and I think everybody's capable of getting through, it just takes some effort and some focus and some time with the material. Things are very different, and I think that's where we are. So, in case there's anybody out there, here's where I'm being provocative and might make you mad. If you think that FileMaker solutions can compete with coding agents today, I encourage you to at least be open to the idea that you might be mistaken, and that the future of solving business problems, as we have been doing for 20 to 30 years in this community, is very different from the way it was in the past. And the primary difference is agents can type faster than you, and they actually know more about software engineering than you do at this point. So, I kind of think of it in a couple different ways, but in one way you can think about it is that bandwidth before, like the slowest part of anything you were doing, was basically how fast you could type on a keyboard, how fast you could manipulate the FileMaker relationship graph. After AI, it's really not that. Those are solved problems. The new bottlenecks are how well you can plan and reason and think and develop expertise in the domain of the problem you're trying to solve. It's very different than it was before. In the last month, we've reached another point where the AI agents have sort of leaped ahead from where they were in the previous month. This has been happening with sort of somewhat regularity since AI first arrived on the scene a few years ago, but every 6 months or so, or approximately, there's a new leap. And at the end of last year, around December, there was a big leap with Opus 4.5 came out, and suddenly AI agents were able to code at a level they weren't before. They could complete tasks fully without guidance from a human. And then what's just happened is with Fable GPT 5.6, some of the open models from the Chinese companies, GLM 5.2, Grok 4.5, which just got released this week, and Meta's Muse Spark. These are all extremely good AI coding agents. The tools that they're built around, whether using Cursor or Claude Code or Codex or whatever, using with those models and the harnesses together, these are software engineers. And I use that term very specifically. They know how to commit to Git repos. They know how to do pull requests. They know how to deploy your systems to the various deployment frameworks out there, whether it's Vercel, Netlify, Railway, what have you. They understand all the mechanics of how that works. They understand how to write tests, how to run tests. They understand how to use browsers to test their own code. So prior to this jump, there were gaps in that. They didn't really understand the professional software developer lifecycle. They had to take a lot of prompting from somebody who knew how to do that to make them do that. They now do it on their own. So, about 6 months ago, when this first round hit, and I sort of over the break, became obvious that if we can't make FileMaker an agentic coding target, it's going to be very, very, very hard to compete with platforms where agents can code. I hope this isn't controversial anymore, but for some people who are thinking it, maybe we can talk about this at either during this session or at full access a little bit more. But I really don't think this is controversial, but maybe it is. And so I'm putting it in there just to really try to get people to think about what we're talking about here. Because now, for another anecdote from this week, OpenAI released GPT 5.6 Sol and Luna. According to reports, GPT 5.6 Sol did all of the post-training and RL training on 5.6 Luna. So we are now at a point where the AI agents are able to recursively work on themselves to make themselves better. So if we can't connect FileMaker to this engine, this gap is going to continue to widen until we just can't cross it. So that was where we were. That's what we were looking at the beginning of the year. So the first thing that we did is we basically said, where's the best place that we can plug AI agents into FileMaker? And the answer is pretty obvious, and that's web viewers, because web viewers are run on web code and the AI agents are trained on web code. So, and the other thing is that FileMaker layouts are the most weird thing in sort of, if you think about the stuff that coding agents and LLMs have been trained on, it ain't FileMaker layouts. Their FileMaker layouts are extremely complex. They're strange and odd, and they're going to be very difficult for AIs to ever be able to do well. So if we want to be able to make, and the other thing is, people spend a lot of time pushing pixels around FileMaker layouts. I think most people would agree that is a very big part of or has been a big part of the job of a FileMaker developer over the last several decades. So if we could remove that, and make that agentically codable, that would be a big win. And so that is what ProofKit and ProofKit MCP became. How do we do that? And I just want to say a couple things here, because Lynn explicitly said not a sales pitch. First of all, ProofKit is free. There's no charge, and you can there's no charge for any usage of it or or there's no license on the code that you produce for it. It's just a free thing that you can use. And also, as Ryan has said in his blog posts and in his announcements and podcasts that he's been in, they're working with us and with Soliant to bring these kinds of features into the FileMaker platform natively. The reason that Claris chose us to do that is because of our work with ProofKit. So, you know, the thinking that went into ProofKit is influencing the thinking that's going into what Claris is currently working on. So if you want to build apps that are FileMaker apps today that are AI friendly, there's a couple of principles that you can just sort of keep in mind. And this builds on this idea. This builds on this idea of a web viewer. Agents are really good at things they know a lot. They've seen a lot of training data on. And so the first thing is they know a lot about web code, a tremendous amount about web code. So building web viewer apps is a natural place for them to excel. Somebody asked if we expect to be Sherlocked. In other words, if we expect for ProofKit to not be necessary. The answer is both yes and no. There's a question in the chat. We want the things that we built into ProofKit to be native features of FileMaker, so we can continue to do the next things that are helpful to make agents even better at programming in FileMaker. So this is something where we want them to build this in so that we can go on and build the next layer of things that will add value. So not only do we expect to be Sherlock, we want to be Sherlock. That is very much an explicit part of our strategy. So getting back to this, web viewers are pretty important. Another thing to think about just as you're building your solutions, JSON in and JSON out. Agents are very good at JSON. So if you are building your logic scripts to take a JSON payload, do a bunch of stuff, and then return a JSON result, then you are building scripts that agents will be better able to understand and to work with. So you can still use FileMaker scripts in this process. It's really very helpful because scripts are the way you do transactions. Any kind of complex data manipulation in FileMaker is going to be with a script. So you still get to use all of your script skills, but by having them accept JSON and return JSON, you're giving the AI agents a helpful handle that they understand really well and know how to use. They will just think about a script as being a REST endpoint that they know how to call, and so they'll be able to use it quite well. Another thing is to be helpful is just to think about building your scripts so they're context free, so that they don't rely on a particular layout. Because if you're in a web viewer, the web viewer is not necessarily attached to any layout. So if the UI is in a web viewer, what we do is we build it on top of a table that has no context. Essentially, it's just it's a utility table that has no fields of any value or anything in it. There's no context. And so the context is all created by the scripts. Yeah, so what else? Let's see. Speak the language you already know. So yes. So basically I'm reiterating this here. So let me see. I think what I want to do here, let me look ahead for a second. Yeah, what I want to do here is drop in, show some of what we're able to do with this and how fast we're able to develop with these ideas in place, and then dive in a little bit more to how to think about agentic engineering and how that is expressed in ProofKit, but in anything you're going to be building with agents. Before I do that, is there any other questions or any comments or anything anybody wants to know before we look at some examples? Yeah, so somebody's commenting about Matt's presentation last night at Dig FM. Matt's always got a very good take on how to build tooling around this. And if we have some time, I can talk a little bit more about that. But I expect that Matt's tools will also be able to be extended and build on top of whatever Claris is building down the road. And I think they'll all be useful. Matt's always worth checking out what he's doing. He does really good, high quality, polished stuff, and he always has an interesting take on how these things work. So highly recommend you check out what he's up to. So this is a big one that always comes up. The main question given all this is why keep it in FileMaker? And so the question there's a number of ways to answer this. I think the first thing I'll say is you already know FileMaker. You could certainly vibe code all the things up that you want to do in a new system, and you'll have to learn about Postgres. You'll have to learn about web authentication, and you'll have to learn about whether you're using record level access with Supabase and the problems that might cause you if you expose all your data to your end users. You'll have to also learn about web CVEs, and if there's a CVE, you need to, which is a security bulletin, you need to take action immediately to resolve that in your web application that you're building. And the list goes on and on and on and on and on and on and on. You're having to absorb an entire new ecosystem into how to think about these things. And the agents will help you here quite a bit. But at the end of the day, you are the one who is still responsible for the code. That's a very key point here. AIs can make mistakes. They will make mistakes, just like any software engineer will make a mistake. You are the one who's responsible for the code. So if you already have a system that is running in FileMaker, and you already have expertise in FileMaker, and you already have a FileMaker server that has a security model that you understand, it is much easier to go to a web viewer app than it is to build a whole new app. So Saul's got some good answers there. I think there are a lot of good reasons to consider staying in FileMaker. There are some advantages to this hybrid approach. In fact, we have on our ProofKit website, we have I've got a whole why web viewers page. You can check this out. And it's actually pretty great. You could think about FileMaker as a multi-user Electron, right? Even though there are web apps, there's still Electron, which is hugely popular. In fact, many of the apps you use every day are built on Electron, which is essentially an embedded browser and web technology. And you can think of FileMaker as being a multi-user Electron with a database and a backend you already understand built in. I think that's a really good way of explaining it, right? So you get access to all the things that desktop apps can do and all the things that web apps can do. And if there's a reason that we still have Electron, then there's a reason that we could still have FileMaker, is the way I would think about it. Anything else? Yeah, so I think let's start looking at what we can do and sort of how long it took to do it. So this is an app. This is a FileMaker app that I've been building. I just started this last night. And it's got a dashboard. It's basically a CRM. It's got the types of things that I have to do that are overdue, that are today. I can add filters, show me only emails. I've got this beautiful scrolling grid. I can pick different owners of events to see, show completed. Oh, I can also, this is fully responsive to my light and dark selection for my entire operating system. So it picks up and it will switch the UI based on whether I prefer light or dark mode. It's also fully responsive, so the screens will resize and redraw depending on the size of the screen, so it works on mobile. We've got all the nice things we've come to expect from modern applications just built in. We've got searches, the different data types we have here. I've got a built-in universal search. Right? All of this is built in, and this was in. So I built the data model in FileMaker and the scripts. Let me look at the data model here. So I just built a basic party model, very simple, sort of really simple party model in Anchor Buoy setup. I have very few scripts because I'm mostly using Execute Data API to do all the heavy lifting. I've got a couple of transaction scripts that need to do the heavy lifting. And like if I look at deals, I've got a Kanban board where all of this can be drag and drop. And this actually, in order to do Kanban boards, you actually need a pretty well thought out backend FileMaker script to do this well. And so there's actually a transaction script that updates all of the records that need to get updated, because when you drag and drop something in a Kanban board, you actually have to update all the records in this column to get their new sort position. So it's helpful to have a transaction script that does that. And then if it fails for any reason, the whole thing is reverted instead of partially reorganizing your stuff. What else? Oh, another really cool thing is this works perfectly in WebDirect the same way. So I've got the exact same UI, no different between the FileMaker backend, the FileMaker UI, and the WebDirect UI. Works exactly the same. The only difference is that if I try to do a back button here, there's no back buttons don't work in WebDirect, so we get this kind of thing. And if you try to do refresh, you'll get the same thing. So WebDirect is not a perfect web app because it doesn't allow you to do back buttons, but at least it no longer, this used to just log you out of the database and you'd have to relog in if you did Command R or a refresh or back button. It doesn't do that anymore. So let me stop there and get if there's any questions or comments about this so far in terms of, oh, and one more thing to say, I didn't read any of the code that was written, not one line, never looked at it. Anybody have any questions or comments? I like interaction, so don't feel like you're interrupting. I'd
Well,
rather
Dave said
people
something
say
about
stuff.
checking the tabs at the top of the screen. Dave, you want to?
I think that's somebody who can't see my screen. They're not sharing.
I have a question, Todd. So I'm assuming you're using ProofKit,
Yep.
and so doing that, is the agent able to add the tables and do the anchor buoy?
No, so ProofKit cannot currently do, it does not do scripts or tables or any of that. It just does the UI layer.
So is the approach just ask it, what are the tables that I need, and then you build the tables and
Yeah, so it does have some clipboard stuff built in. So the way I actually built this is I said, hey, I want a simple CRM data model. And then I said, make me a clipboard contents, make me a clipboard of all of those tables. And then, so I was able to get the tables created really fast. And then I had to go into the graph and create all that. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. So if you saw any of the stuff that Claris has done in any of their videos, you know that they're working on scripts and tables and relationship graph and all that stuff. So this is just a limitation of what we have right now, which is ProofKit. You can use clipboards, but you're limited to that. We think there's much more you can do to get much more of the kinds of interactions that we want. So we hope that scripts and tables and custom functions and calcs and all the key things you're able to work with agents as hopefully as well as you can with the UI code. The caveat being, and one of the main reasons why we really think you should use web viewers is because the software agents are fantastic web developers.
Yeah.
And no matter how good the agents get at being able to edit a FileMaker layout, the gap on what it takes to make a FileMaker layout, it's not in the training data. It is going to be very challenging to get them to produce, say, complex web viewer, complex FileMaker layouts. Whereas
do
all you have to basically say is, make me a Kanban board, and it will make you a Kanban board.
Yeah.
Right? How could you even possibly get an agent to build you a Kanban board in FileMaker? the stuff just isn't there to do it, right?
So to me that begs the question, why wouldn't you just go all web front end then? Because every
I
new project I do is I just go straight web front end.
Sure, you
FileMaker
absolutely
on the back.
can. You absolutely can. People do that, and it's a fine way to do it. But then you now own auth. You now have to deal with auth. It's up to you to enforce that. One of the
Well,
really
but
nice things, one of the
but why
really
can't
nice
you?
things about FileMaker web viewer apps is that the auth, you don't have to deal with auth at all. You're getting exactly the auth that the user's already logged in with. So you're
I'm
just
just
getting their
using
privilege set.
FileMaker's auth. Why wouldn't you just use FileMaker's auth?
We are using FileMaker's auth. That's exactly what we're doing.
I'm
We're not
talking about
using
with a web front end. So
So with the web front end, you have to build into the web front end how that auth is enforced. You're going to have to build cookies or whatever it is. You got to do it.
I mean, so in the same way that the agents are good at, doing all this web stuff, that so far in my experience, that hasn't been, something that was an obstacle really.
Look, if you're comfortable building web apps, I say have at it. Go for it. I'm not gonna, look, we build, I mean, we probably have 100 web apps that we support for our customers. So if I'm sitting here to tell you that we don't build custom web apps, that would be complete garbage. We do it all the time.
Okay.
But I can also tell you that when a CVE comes out, it's like 3 days of my engineering team fixing all the websites that we have to fix because of some security issue or some flaw in the security that were in the models or in the modules, the supply chain attacks, these kinds of things that are happening on the open web are
How does that
mitigated.
not also affect web viewer? Because I'm assuming that the web viewer is using JavaScript libraries, and
It
so if
sure
that
is. And
CVE
so again, like, I'm not saying you can't go to a web app. Please do not read this as don't do a web app. I'm saying if you're comfortable doing web apps, do web apps. Have at it. But if you want to build, if you want to build inside of FileMaker without having to learn all of those things, then you can do it right inside of FileMaker. I want to be very clear on that.
Cool, yeah.
We build, again, we have at least 100 custom web apps that we support all the time. So it's not like we're not doing it, but also it's not an either or. Like you can,
Right.
for some things, FileMaker web apps are the right solution. For some things, they're not. And you can read about that on like our Why Web Viewers thing. There's some really nice things about being a local desktop app that you don't get in a web app. For example, you have access to the file system you don't have access to inside of a web app, right? So you have a nice PDF builder that you would be challenging to build inside of a web app. So there are reasons to do it. There are reasons to go either way. And by the way, ProofKit can help you build web apps too, because one of the things that it has is a MCP connector that allows you to read and write and see data, see all the data and the context you need from inside of the database. This is a big question that comes up every time. And I think I would just say it's not an either or, it's both.
Yeah. Cool.
Tony.
Hey, yeah, thanks. First off, I really appreciate what you said at the top that you're going to make some controversial comments and you like a good conversation discussion. So in that spirit, I'm going to say that I've been monitoring the conversations, and one of the points of divergence is layouts. Should there be three kinds? I'd say there are three kinds. One, native FileMaker, old school, if you want to call them that, 100% web viewer, and then hybrids. So I'll just say that I think that there's a time and a place for each of them. And
Sure.
I know people who are using FileMaker layouts, and I'd also add to that I think the FileMaker tools, which are not perfect, as we all know, if you really trick them out and use the features of the platform, I think FileMaker has some competitive advantages. And I'll just close by saying I think what you're doing, facilitating the process of building web viewer based layouts, is awesome.
Thank
and
you.
I think a little bit of both that's the path I'm going to go down.
So that's the path I started on. I was building parts of FileMaker layouts, and I've especially once AI hit, I just don't do it anymore. It's just not, it's not effective or fast enough for me. I really don't miss anything about native FileMaker layouts. It's all can be done inside of web viewers, but to each their own. Have at it. Do what you like. I think that the number one thing for me is that an agent has to be able to program it. If an agent can't program it, I'm just not interested in it anymore, because I can't possibly move as fast if an agent can't program it as I can if an agent can. And that's the number one thing for me. That's it. So it has to be agent first. If it's not agent first, I'm just not interested. And it's just that. I've adapted to the speed and the facility and the sort of pace that I get out of just relying on the agents 100% of the time. I don't want to go back. I can't really imagine going back. But I think everybody has to go down that path, and I would encourage you to start and to try it and to just give it a try and see where you land at the end of that period. Like I think if you tried building layout based stuff in the past and you haven't used agents or you haven't used ProofKit, it's like somebody who tried ChatGPT when it came out and hasn't touched AI since, saying, well, AI doesn't work. Because it's just, we're in a different world. This is a discontinuity. What else? Anything else?
Yeah, quick question. So what did this take to do? Like,
Yeah, so let me show you.
What kind of prompting? All that.
So let me show you. I'm going to go into, first I'm going to show you the coding agent that I used to spin up this exact thing. And then if we have time, I'll start a fresh one so you can see how it starts. So this is the start of the coding agent, the run that I did to build this entire app after I had already built the all the scripts and the tables and the layouts. And what I'm going to do is let me quit Claude and reopen it. So this is Claude Desktop, which is what I use. I use it in code mode. And so what you see on the left is the chat session that I did to start it. It's pretty long, but with Claude, you can run compaction, and you can compact the previous messages and just keep going. And so that's what I did. And at the beginning, I used one of Claude's features, which is goal. And I said, set up a ProofKit web viewer project in this folder, and use Sonnet subagents for task execution, and then use the preview browser to prove your work. So this is the preview browser. And so this is really important. Claude has a built-in web browser. And so one of the things that ProofKit gives you, and is one of the really important things, is it lets Claude's preview browser think that it's inside of FileMaker as a web viewer. So in order to do that, in order to make all this work, what I had to do was run the ProofKit installer, and then I, hang on, where's the other layout? Here we go. If I go into, let me open up, doesn't really matter, open this up. I go into layout mode, and one of the things that gets installed with the installer is an add-on. So once I put that add-on in, what that does is it gives me this folder full of scripts. It gives me these few layouts, and it gives me one table, this ProofKit app table here. So that all gets put in by the add-on. And then what you do is you run this connect to ProofKit MCP. And what that does is that lets FileMaker, or actually I should say Claude now believes that this preview browser is running inside of FileMaker. And so all of the things, all of the perform FileMaker script with Java, the perform FileMaker script that's in the web viewer is in this preview browser. So what that means is that when Claude is working on this, it can actually open up this preview browser and it can tab around and it can drive this browser and prove that it's building things correctly. And so that's why I said at the beginning of this, use your preview browser to prove your work. And so by doing that, I basically just prompted it to say, set this thing up, and when it's done, make sure you can navigate, open up the page, and make sure that it's working. And so it did that. So the other thing that gets installed by the installer is this ProofKit MCP. So if I look at connectors, manage connectors, and we look at I know you're in here. Here you are, ProofKit MCP. You see all of these tools. So Claude has access to these tools. So it knows how to get clipboard formats. It can write to the clipboard. It can see what files are connected. It can get script names, value list info. It can deploy this bundle to FileMaker. It can get relationship info, layout metadata, table metadata. It can call the execute data API. It can call FileMaker SQL, and it can do all that stuff. So Claude can now look inside of the FileMaker file, look at the layouts. It can generate TypeScript code that is that will connect to those layouts and basically do all this for you. So you don't have to know how to do you don't have to know out of the box how to do any of those things. So the ProofKit MCP knew how to set this up, did the entire process, and proved to itself that it was set up. And then I just started telling it what I wanted to do. And so I worked through all the different features that I wanted. And so the last feature that I did earlier this morning was build a universal search and a pop-up that allows you to type a string and see the results. And then I told it to use Sonnet subagents along with that work because Fable's very expensive. So one of the nice tricks is with Fable's very expensive, but if you tell it to say, if you say, hey, you're the orchestrator, whenever you need to carry out a task, spin up a subagent and use Sonnet, it will be far cheaper. And so that is a very critical tip for doing all of this. So Kent asks, how does it handle passing through record column security privileges? So again, one of the awesome things about using this approach is that you are inheriting the FileMaker privilege set and how the way all privileges work inside of your app. If the user is logged in and they have an account that has access to some tables and not others, then this web viewer, this web app will have access to some tables and not others. So we are completely sidestepping and not having to deal with any of the stuff that you might have to do if you were building you don't have to think about auth. You're just using the FileMaker auth that's already there. Make sense, Kent? Any other questions? So who thinks they can't do this?
Yeah.
Everybody thinks they can do this? That's awesome.
No comment.
No comment.
Laughing.
So Todd,
So
what
one of the
about
main
what about
reasons
the
we built-
technical debt questions of, a lot of us don't necessarily understand the code that's being created, right?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So part of what we baked into this was everything we know about how to build this. A lot of the stuff that Jeremy was talking about, like 10-stack query and all that, is baked in. So you get to just benefit from all of the learning that we've already put into it. I would say that this does not absolve you from having to learn new things. You will have to learn new things, but it gets you much farther down the road before you need to um, really get into it. Like, I didn't really have to tell it anything specific about like how to build this in any of this stuff, with the exception of I told it, like I gave it examples and code samples that I wanted it to use on the web. Like I told it, I said, here's a Kanban thing I want you to use. And I gave it some of those hints, but I didn't tell it very much about how. That's all baked into what ProofKit sets up for you. Because once you have your project set up with a very good template of well done code and skills, the agents are very good at copying that code, basically following the styles that you've already done, that are already in there. So the key thing, there's a couple of key things. One is get a really good template set up that is configured explicitly for this purpose to work with FileMaker and already has a whole bunch of hard-won baked-in lessons into it. And two, make sure the agent can see and correct its own mistakes. And that is what having a preview browser built into this whole thing can do for you. When the agent screws up, it can see that it's screwed up. It can see the error logs in the console, and it just uses those to fix itself. And so I always do is tell it, hey, when you're building something, prove that what you've built actually works. So when it was building this universal search, it started using Claude and Chrome. So it started using the built-in browser to prove that it was actually doing what it said it was doing. So I said, you know, it's going to be able to come in and it will actually click around and it will start typing and it will try to see, you know, whatever it can find, and it will click on this and it will say, oh, I did it, or it didn't work. And if it didn't work, it'll fix itself. So you start with a good template that has everything connected. You have an MCP server that can read what's inside of FileMaker, and you have the ability for the agent to see the work that it's doing and fix its own errors. And this just does itself. That's how it works. You will certainly begin to hit issues where you will have to work with the agent to learn more about how this stuff works and optimize certain things. And you'll have to learn how to write scripts in such a way that the agent can call them. So you will have to learn things, but this gets you much farther down the road than you would have been otherwise. So Saul asked, do you recommend using ProofKit on pre-existing FM files? So you certainly can, and that's what some people are doing. A lot of our team is doing that. So one of the reasons we built ProofKit was so that our team, instead of, because normally, like we've been building web viewer apps like this for years, frankly, since 19.6 shipped. It's been a very common part of our practice, but it took our web engineering team to do it, not our FileMaker developer team to do it. Now our FileMaker developer team can do this. So we have most of our developers, our FileMaker developers, not web developers. They can all do this now. They don't need to, they didn't need to become web engineers to be able to build applications that work like this. And so in many cases, how that happens is inside of a project that's already happening, there will be a requirement where it's like, I need to do something that FileMaker can't do. And so they spin up ProofKit and they make like a single view with ProofKit, like maybe a Kanban board or something like that. And then they make another view and they make like they make charts like this, right? These beautiful animated charts that do all the nice things that you want to do here. And then they might make another view. And then eventually they say, why don't we just add a navigation bar and start building the UI over in this new beautiful way? And that's what ends up happening. And you end up with something where the backend layouts aren't really used anymore, like the FileMaker UI layouts, or they're, over time you simply move more and more into the web UI, and you leave what's in the FileMaker UI. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, kind of thing. And that's fine. And that's totally fine. A couple of nice things about web views is inside of a web viewer, you can click on a button and it can pop up a card window to a FileMaker layout, and that works just fine. Card window will be FileMaker. You can do whatever you want in FileMaker. You close that window and you're back to the web viewer. So building these kinds of hybrids are actually quite simple to do. So somebody asked, when you build this way, you only have one UI layout. So the answer is, when I'm building FileMaker, that is exactly the way that I do it. There's only one layout, and it's one web viewer, and the entire app goes into it. If you've already got a pre-existing system, you may find that an easier way to get there is to start with more than one layout based on a web viewer that does a different thing, and you just do standard FileMaker navigation to and from those layouts. So it's not one of these either or things, but if you're in a greenfield situation, or if you're in a situation where there just aren't that many FileMaker layouts to begin with, then you're going to find very quickly that you're going to want to rebuild the UI. I mean, this is just a nice UI. This is easy to do. The agents know how to do this. This is not hard. So eventually you're going to get to the point where this is what you want to do. And so you'll do it, and it won't be a big deal. But you're definitely going to go through that transition.
Somebody asked about seeing a data entry.
Yeah, so here's one. All right, if I want to send an email. Any particular questions about it? And is there, do you want to see, let's, what we can do? I don't know if I've got one in here. Let's do this. Let's say contacts. Oh, you know what we do? We have quick edit, create a new deal. All right, so here's the data entry layout. New deal.
And is this a card window?
Is that
FileMaker?
This is not FileMaker, but it could be. You could do this. Like, this is what I see a lot of people do too, because they're still comfortable with this. And so this totally works. You can have a button in your web viewer that pops open a FileMaker layout to do this kind of thing. It's actually totally acceptable. I mean, it works great. There are many use cases where that is a fine way to do it. And it works fine. The nice thing is you can actually get record locking, kind of the old way that you're used to. So it's a very good transitional way to do it. This one does not use that. This one is I just told the agent to use a modal to make an edit view, and it creates a deal and it adds it, deal created. So that kind of thing works fine. But you can absolutely build those as card windows. It works fantastic. And if you don't want to build them as card windows, if you want to build them so they take over the whole screen, then just build a card window that takes over the whole screen. It works fine. And it will work in WebDirect too. Somebody, let's see, what else we have? Users sound specific problem, place layouts, performance issues. Yeah, so performance issues on layouts is a good one. So Saul asked, what's the preferred method for fetching data? So we're getting under the hood a little bit, which is good. We have one script called execute data API that we've written that can actually execute a batch of data API requests, creating and updating data as it needs to. And so the agent knows how to call that script and how to, again, one of the reasons, like, the execute data API is based on the REST API. Agents are really good at REST APIs. So what ProofKit has in it is basically a FM fetch, which is a REST API like library that knows how to call FileMaker scripts. And it knows how to make a web request. Again, like, the execute data API looks a lot like a web request. So by leaning on that, the agents know how to do this really, really well. And so they don't need they actually have training data on the FileMaker data API. Like, if you ask Claude or any agent how to write a request for the FileMaker data API, and you say, I want to do it with, Python or Go or whatever, it will do a pretty good job because it knows how the FileMaker data API works. That's in the training data, right? So by connecting up, by having this script and building a mechanism for the agent just to be able to do what it knows how to do, then we just gain all of that from the training data that's in the models. Ian says, early on, looked like your graph was anchor buoy. Is there any advantage to that? Not really. There are cases if you want to do data API fetches that are optimized, you may want to have portals on those layouts. So again, now we're back in like FileMaker optimization. How do I optimize? Well, I can make two fetches. I can fetch to the invoice and the invoice headers or the invoice line items to get that data, or I can just fetch the invoice and have a portal of line items on there. That's one request. That's probably going to be easier and faster. So it's really just a choice. There's times when I think having layouts with relationships on them makes sense, and there are times when it's not necessary. I would say that. What else? Let's see. Preferred method. Blah, 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 blah.
He is asking
think that's
about
it.
anchor buoy.
Yeah, that was what I just asked. Like, why did I make anchor buoy? I think so. If I jump ahead a little bit, like the intent of what Claris is up to is to be able to drive making tables and relationships and all that stuff. And I found that actually anchor buoy is in the training data. So if you say, hey, I want to make a bunch of relationships that are, I need to make a relationship graph. It'll say, well, do you want to use anchor buoy, or what do you want to use? And then it might even, I've also found that it even knows the different variations of anchor buoy. Like, do you want to use this naming convention versus that naming convention? So I was messing around with some of that. So there are some parts that are in the training data really well. I think relationships and tables are pretty good. Scripts, unfortunately, are not great. Functions are pretty good. There's a lot of because functions are something that is very similar to what the agents already know. It is just a functional. It's only got a couple hundred functions built in. It's not hard for it to understand that. Scripts are a little tougher. Scripts are a little more challenging. But so I was playing around with it. That's why they're there.
Do you think that's because in scripting there's so many ways to get to your endpoint? I mean, you could do
Yeah,
this,
that's part
you
of
could do
it.
that.
That's part of it. There's not a lot of good training data on what a good script is. It's also, especially old style scripting, is like it's mixture of UI and data and logic all together, which is why one of the recommendations I gave was start thinking about scripting, having your scripts be very separate from your UI so that you have context-free scripts, right? Because agents are going to understand that. They understand front end and back end. So they understand that if you've got a web viewer, that's the front end, and they understand that your FileMaker scripts and your database is the back end. And so they can actually extrapolate from that quite well.
Can I just add to that for a second? If you
Ian, yeah, I can't hear you too well, so I don't know if you got a different mic selected or just lean in a bit.
Is this better?
Not really.
Not really. Okay.
Everybody else feels louder to me than you do. Is that true for
Okay,
anybody else, or is it just me?
I can hear him okay.
Okay, good.
Okay. Right. So what I found was that with scripting, so I do a lot of insert from URL. So I basically gave Claude a number of examples of how I want my insert from URL scripts to work, and basically how to use that as a baseline to build a skill for that one specific type of script. And that worked quite well. It's not like a general purpose, do everything skill, but it does one thing really well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you can do that for sure. Like I built a skill for that custom function that does JSON queries. I forget the name of it right now, but it's super powerful custom function, but I can't write it to save my life. It's too hard to write. But if you give an agent the skill for that, it can do that quite well. So yeah, things like that. What else? Anything else? So everybody's all in?
Well, you talked earlier about Claris Sherlocking you.
Sherlocking. So
Have they started?
So
So
Saul
have
asks,
they
is FM fetch?
started?
Yeah, so they started that. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
So, I mean, what I can say about it is that Claris has hired us to work with them on this, on basically making what I'm showing here first party. That's been made public, so I can say that. Beyond that, I can just repeat what has been said in all the rest of those statements about when you can expect to see some of this stuff come forward. I can't say more about it, except basically just what I've said is that the intent is to make these kinds of features first party, and to extend it to be able to do things like scripts and tables and layouts and layouts to some degree. But I think if you're hoping that FileMaker, that agents can make your 1,000 layout object layout agentically codable, I think you are going to have to wait a very long time. But if you wanted to make a data API layout for you, I think we'll get to that kind of thing.
Okay, that's very, very funny and very cool. You have about 15 minutes if you wanted
Yeah,
to.
I got
so
a
we're gonna
few. I
build
want to go back
something
to my
from-
slides and maybe I can show a couple more things, but let me just go back and finish up the slides so I don't miss any points I wanted to make. That's all right. So I've been hammering on this. Speak the language the models already know. This is super important. You will get farther if you lean on the concepts they already understand than if you try to make the models bend to FileMaker, and especially your particular flavor of weird FileMaker. It's going to struggle. It's going to be harder for it to do. So that's one of our key principles. So this is something that I talked about a little bit. And let me just hammer on it one more second. So what makes these agents so good, and in particular now why they're so much better, is the idea of loops. So LLMs looping with tools is what makes an agent. And so what happened in December is that the agents got really good at multiple turn loops and being able to take the feedback that they got from things like TypeScript, which generates type errors when you do something wrong, linting and end-to-end tests. They know how to run end-to-end tests, and they can tell whether they've made a mistake that broke the test, and they can fix it. So that looping thing got really good in December. And then what I think has happened in this latest iteration in the last month is they now are really good at looping at the entire professional software development lifecycle. So they know how to use Git, and they know how to make pull requests, and they know how to check if the continuous integration and deployment tests and end-to-end tests and build pipelines that are running on those pull requests, which is basically just automated testing. They know how to check on that. They know how to tell if there are merge conflicts that it needs to be resolved, and it knows how to resolve those merge conflicts. So now what we are at is we're at the stage where you still have to know how some of the basics of how these things fit together, and certainly to really make this a career is you got to learn more about how all that works. But we're now at the stage where you basically just talk about the features you need to get built, and if you have the right template in place, it can build those features and it can loop on all those things. So it's the loops that are really, really important. I just said that. Inner loops, outer loops, and gates. I said that too. I already said all this. So here's a very important part to say though. right now, you are still very critical part of the loop. Agents do not have agency, which is kind of weird to say, but they don't know what to build. They don't know what problems to solve. They know the how, but they don't know the what. And they're getting very good at verifying whether they've passed all their tests and whether they can navigate around the browser and decide that it looks pretty good. But you still have to verify that the stuff works the way that it's intended to work. Increasingly, that does not mean you have to read the code, although that's still useful in certain cases. But increasingly, that just means that you have to go and verify that the features work the way that you expect them to work by clicking around in test versions of it to make that happen. So that's really all I wanted to say in terms of my slide. So ProofKit is free. It's available. It is a hint at what's coming from Claris. So you can go to proofkit.proof.sh and download it. And there's videos and walkthroughs about how to get set up and get running on the whole thing and get it started. So that's it. I can do some more demos if you want, but I want to make sure there's not questions or people are like, you're absolutely crazy. I'm not going to do this way. I'm not going to wrap my FileMaker in Java. I don't want to write stuff I don't understand, which I totally get. And I hear you. I really do.
How much do you have to prep your file with DDLs for your fields?
I did not. You don't have to. ProofKit does not require that. It can read the DDL, so that's it can get the metadata either by reading the DDL, or it can just use the design functions. Basically, it's the scripts. Get script names. It's just doing script names. Get script names. You know, like it can use the execute data API is super powerful because that has a bunch of metadata functions. It can get the fields on a layout. It can get the fields in a table. It can do all that. So the agents do that. They also run execute SQL, and they know how to write the metadata for execute SQL. They're pretty good at FileMaker SQL. They're actually getting pretty darn good at that. That doesn't seem to be as big a problem as it was a while ago. So it can call all those scripts as well, and it can use that to generate the metadata it needs to. I kept it pretty high level. I didn't get into a lot of the nitty-gritty details, of which there are, and you're gonna have to learn stuff. Like I hope I'm not leaving the impression that this is there's nothing to do. You definitely have to learn, but ProofKit will get you into this way of working way faster than if you tried to do this all without having this leg up, without having a template that's set up with a lot of the things that Jeremy talked about baked into it. Not all of it. Jeremy's ideas about like how to load large data sets, those are things you're going to have to learn. But we started with a lot of the primitives, like he talked about TAN-stack query, and that is baked in, and how to use it is baked in. So things like that are already in it. So you just get a leg up. You get a big boost in your journey towards building this way.
Okay, do we have any other questions or comments? I mean, that's a wonderful presentation, Todd. You've given us an insight into things that are coming down on our heads, whether we are prepared or not.
Yeah, like I want people to, it's a hard thing because I don't want to frighten people. Because I think sometimes people, sometimes it's hard to distinguish between fear and anger. And especially I think for me, I'm the kind of person that can react quite negatively to my way of being and way of being in the world is being challenged. And certainly AI is doing that. And so there are defensives. I think the self likes to throw up a lot of defenses against these kinds of things. So I understand that, and I felt it, and I'm trying to thread the needle between being clear-eyed and blunt about what I see happening. But also like, and I really believe this, nobody's been doing this for more than 6 months. Like, there's no experts here. A lot of times I hear people email me and they say, I want to know all the best practices. I want to know, I want to learn all these. There's no best practices, frankly. They're being refigured out every few months. Nobody's been doing this for more than 6 months. You are not behind. There is no reason that anybody on this call cannot start building this way. You absolutely can. I know that because everybody on our team, all of our FileMaker developers who were not web developers, some of which have been using FileMaker for 25, 30 years, are able to build with this stuff now and are very excited about it. So this is not just me saying, I think you can do it. This is empirical evidence that you can do it. So I'm trying to thread the needle between like, please don't ignore what's coming. And here is something that I think can help you.
Todd,
And so I hope you just try it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When do you see the overlay with allowing end users, your clients, end users to chat with your database? When do you see building that?
So chatting with your databases can be solved in a number of different ways. ProofKit does actually have, I didn't even cover it at all, but you can totally ask it questions about your database, and it will run execute SQL and execute data API queries to pull data out, and it will draw you nice pictures and do all that kind of stuff. The reality is that these coding agents are really good at just making whatever visualizations you want, given if they have access to the data. Because we can write execute SQL and because we can write execute data API, you can just ask, if you go into chat mode, in Claude, and just start asking like, hey, what file's connected? Give me a chart of my sales. It'll do that. It'll already do that. And Claude has a beautiful visualizer that it'll use to build the charts for you. You don't even have to go build a custom app for that. Claude will do it. So will ChatGPT. They'll all do this now. So as long as they have access to the data, then all of these agents can do that kind of stuff for you already.
Well, that's wild. My clients have, for like 30 years, wanted the telepathy plugin where they can just, say something or type something and it'll build a report they've never asked for, sorted in a way that's odd or whatever. And if these agents can give them that, that would be a big relief.
They can.
Because
now,
you don't have
it doesn't
to build
remove
700
your job.
reports.
It's not 100% magic. Like if you just let the agents do queries that your FileMaker system is not well optimized for, it's going to be a challenge, right? So you'll have to learn, like you learned how to optimize your data model for whatever reports you were doing in the past, you'll have to do that. Like Jeremy talked about some of that too. You will have to learn how to optimize the data for the agents to be able to make ad hoc queries in a way that is functional for them. But they can do it. So one of the questions that we are getting occasionally now is, what about proof chat? And the honest truth is that proof chat, which is what we did last year to do chatting over data with FileMaker, is basically obsolete at this point. You don't need it. You can just use any coding. You can use Claude, you can use ChatGPT, and you can use ProofKit to do your own chatting, or you can use other tools. You could use the AutoFMS MCP server. You could use Claris's MCP server to give access to your data. They can all chat over your data. You do not need proof chat to do that anymore. So
cool.
There's that.
Okay. Corey, did you have a comment or question?
Oh, I just wanted to ask a real quick situation or a use case potentially. I've been playing with it on my own and it's been great, but we have a lot of databases with large list views and lots of portals and so forth. Would this be a good tool for creating sort of standalone web browser tools within the within an existing database, replacing these FileMaker
Yes.
lists with.
So, but I'll tell you that the infinite scrolling list that you get in FileMaker is one of those areas you're going to have to get some advanced learning in to do this. You can do it in a web viewer. Jeremy hinted at some of this stuff about what it takes to get large data sets into a web viewer. And these are things you're going to have to learn. There's something basically called infinite scrolling. You can tell if you know about infinite scrolling and you know that TanStackDB can do infinite scrolling, then you can tell your agent, I want a list view that can do infinite scrolling, and it will do it. It'll do a pretty good job, but you'd have to know all that. So you have to learn some of these things, how to do it. But infinite scrolling, and it's actually the way that FileMaker list views work, is they actually only fetch the records that are in view, and like 100 before it and 100 after it. And then every time you scroll, they fetch more, right? That's how FileMaker does it under the hood. And you can actually have your agent write you that same code inside of that same basic idea inside of a web viewer, and it will do that. But that is an advanced feature. You're going to have to, it's not going to fall out by just your first day using ProofKit. People also do use it to replace portals. And we do have some documentation about how you can, inside of a ProofKit based app, you can have it display just particular views on, instead of a whole navigation layout, but just like a list view with like drag and drop columns and all that in a portal. And, basically to replace the portal. You can do that. This is where you're getting more into the sort of advanced hybrid features that you can build. But yes, that's possible.
Okay. Yeah, we're sort of straddling the line between building a whole new database that's probably be HTML, ProofKit, whatever, but then we still have our legacy database that's huge. And
yeah. I think what we see is that people start by replacing, the parts that can most make value of it, and that's easy to do, and you can get a lot of quick wins that way. But then over time, once you get really good with agentic engineering, you're going to start to feel this dread in your bones when you think, I have to go build a new layout. And that's when it's like,
I'm already there.
Yeah, it sets in, and you're like, I can't do it. I just can't. So yeah.
Okay, I have a question.
Sure.
The sample layouts that you showed in your app are very utilitarian and plain. How do you go about modifying that or customizing that look and feel? You use CSS, or you do that agentically? How do you do it?
Yeah. So the UI framework that we're using here is ShadCN, and it has a whole theming layer. So you can if you do a search for ShadCN, Shad SHADCN, you'll find its homepage. And if you click on that and you go to create, here, can I share my screen again just for a moment?
Sure.
I'll share. This is the page here, and it's got this whole theme creator.
Okay.
I can pick different fonts, right? Roboto. There's like 4 different icon libraries you can choose from. I often make them with the Geist font because, of course, why wouldn't I, right? And then what happens is there's this preset down here. If you copy that to the clipboard and you go to your agent and say, apply this ShadCN preset and just paste that in, the agent will just do your whole website, or we'll do your whole thing over with that. So
cool.
You can update the theme pretty easily. And then if you want to get into the nitty gritty, if you want to learn like how Tailwind and React all work together, you could certainly learn all that stuff, and you could get really, really detailed about the look and feel. But I find that for most things, I can get pretty good, a pretty good view just by using this layout. And you can look at all the examples of different components that get set up based on the, it's got, here's all the different colors that you do, So I find I can get pretty good by just clicking around here until I get to something that I like and, go with that. And then I just
Cool.
And the
copy
reality
the
is
code,
you could
paste it
probably
in, and
just
go.
talk to it to tell it what to do.
What's that, John?
The reality is you could probably just talk to it and say, I don't like the blues, change those to greens
You
or
you
whatever.
sure could. Yeah.
Yeah.
You sure could.
Wow.
It has a ShadCN skill baked in. So it knows about ShadCN, and if you told it, it could probably just do it. Or you could say, like if you said, make my theme color this, it would then also make all the variations that it needed to of those themes
Wow.
for you. So it'll just do
Amazing.
all
Cool.
that.
Very cool.
So we're in an era where you really can get quite far without having to know very much about how this stuff is built under the hood. And I think you can create tremendous value today, right now, in your FileMaker solutions if you start thinking about doing it this way. And then once we get to the point where we can modify scripts and schemas and all that stuff in the same agentic fashion, well, now we can go in and start like refactoring legacy databases to work really well in this new way. And I think we can really start to rebuild what we've been building all these years in a new way. So
are there
Cool.
any final questions?
and I have a few minutes
Comments?
if anybody wants to hang out, but I know we are after time. So
Always
Yeah, I
amazing,
can keep the
Todd.
meeting open a few, but I'm going to stop the recording.
okay.
So thank you very much, Todd. Thank you, Jeremy. Chris had to leave, but thank you, Chris. And we will see you next month.
Thanks a lot, Todd. Thanks, Lynn.